Welcome to the Octopod. I'm Kyle Davis, head of the Office of the CTO. Join us as we dive into the latest technologies and trends shaping business. Whether you're a tech enthusiast, a business leader, or just looking to stay ahead in the digital age, this podcast is for you. Let's unlock opportunities with technology together. Let's jump in.
Welcome everyone to a special edition of my Hybrid Trends podcast series with our partners from Microsoft. We've been talking about this concept of Cloud Beyond IaaS and how we can drive cost optimization. We started with 4 episodes introducing the core concept of cost optimization, and our 3 main conversations around hybrid cloud, app modernization, and AI and data. We're now going to start delving into each of them topics in detail, and I'm excited to be joined by Michelle from Microsoft and Sam from our Microsoft team internally to talk about the topic of app modernization. Guys, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Swaby, Senior Solution Architect from our Microsoft practice.
Hi, Michelle Azzopardi, UK Digital and App Innovation Go-to-Market.
So we're going to really break this part into 3 pieces. We're going to talk about what is this migrate and modernize concept and how do we start to approach that, how do we visualize it, and why should we care about approaching it in this way. We're then in the second part going to look at how do you actually start this process, what are the practical steps, tips, and activities you can do to start your journey. Then in the third piece, we're going to look at what are the features and capabilities on the Azure platform that actually help you go on this journey and accelerate the outcome. So let's get into it. We talk about migrate and then we talk about modernize, and I think sometimes the two don't get connected together as well as they should do. Migrate should then lead to modernize, or even straight to modernize if that's the time frame you have to do that. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we see from a why am I looking at cloud having not delivered what I think it should deliver is because everyone got stuck at the migrate phase. They lifted up what they had, they dropped it on cloud and expected something magically different to happen without changing any processes, any code or anything. And it's like, you're not going to get the value if you don't then leverage the features of the new platform. But we hear in the market about this concept of the R's, and there's 5 R's from some people, there's 6, there's 7. I'm sure there's people throwing more R's out there just to try and complicate things a little bit more. But let's level set with everyone, I think, before we get into the rest of the session. I mean, how many R's are there, Sam? And what are they at a high level?
Yeah, so industry standard really is 6 R's. You're right in the fact that can get quite confusing, some different terminologies. But let's just go with the 6 R's framework that we stick to, and also Microsoft. Migration is obviously not the focus of this session, but just for clarity, we've got rehost. Rehost would be to move an existing workload, virtualized or physical, over to a cloud environment, IaaS, or it could mean another solution in cloud, such as ABS. But yeah, let's focus on these modernized ones, and let me go through the remaining ones we have. So we have replatform, re-architect, rebuild, replace, and also retire, but we'll touch on that one at the end of it. So the key ones, and the ones that are going to yield the biggest benefits for customers, are the ones that take advantage of the best that cloud has to offer, essentially. So if we look at replatform, that is minimally making alterations, but you're probably leveraging something that cloud has to offer that you didn't have access to on-prem. So that could be a PaaS service, it could be changing something like a load balancer to something that is natively hosted in Azure, as an example. But you're not doing much in terms of changing the way the application functions end-to-end very much. To move into the next one, re-architect, well, that's when you're actually going back to the whiteboard, essentially, looking at what improvements can be made and where modern approaches could start to replace legacy monolithic approaches. That can be quite time intensive. And again, we'll touch on kind of we recommend as an approach and in what scenarios you would take each. Rebuild is a step further. It represents the highest amount of effort, because essentially what you're saying is this isn't really fit for purpose in cloud. It doesn't translate, it doesn't transform, and it makes more sense to look at what the application was achieving for the business and then starting from scratch. But that does take developer and planning and a lot of invested time to make that pull off. One of the more common ones we see is the replace approach, because it can actually represent the most simplest. We've got Azure Marketplace, and we've got plenty of SaaS offerings. Obviously, plenty of SaaS offerings in Microsoft's world, but third-party vendors, plenty of hosted solutions in the form of SaaS, which could actually tick the box for what your existing application was achieving and more, whilst removing those layers of overhead, administrational management, and the tin that you might have had to deal with on premises. Let's give a little nod to retire. It could make sense that the business doesn't actually need the application anymore. It could be because there's not very many users leveraging it anymore. It doesn't make logical sense to invest a lot of time if 5, 6, 7 users in your corporation are just using this application. Is it a retraining issue? Can you use something from our suite of applications that exist already, move over to that? Or is it a process within the business that doesn't have to lean on this monolithic application? So retire sometimes makes sense. We've said 6 R's. I'm going to nod to a 7th R that pops up quite frequently, and that's retain. It might be a case you've got deadlines, you've got other priorities. It doesn't make sense to invest your time in actually going through any of those R's that we've just gone through. So we say, what? It's working. We'll leave it on-prem. We'll come back to that once we've gone over some other priorities, as an example.
So that gives us 6 R's to think about. Retire, get rid, rehost onto some new platform or other, replace it with a SaaS application, or the ones that are really the focus for this series then is our modernization options of replatform, minimal cloud modernization, re-architect, major cloud modification, or completely rebuild from scratch. So there's our 6 pieces. And Michelle, I mean, you focus a lot of your time in that modernization space, but from your perspective, why should customers look at categorizing and using this 6 R's approach? Why not just sort of ad hoc go around and just figure out what to do with each one individually? What benefit does this sort of framework bring when you're engaging customers?
Yeah, so it's important to actually follow this kind of process. It will help with kind of categorizing those applications and also identifying the effort, the time, what's the return on the investment that you're going to get from following one of those R's. So, for example, if an application, as Sam mentioned, is only going to be used by a few users, doesn't have a long shelf life, is it worth the effort and time and investment in terms of like modernizing that application? So that's why it is important to kind of understand the 6 R's, which applications fall under which R. We can go into that a bit later. Everyone in the organization can get behind the application modernization, the investment, and know exactly what they need to do. If we all understand when we are re-architecting the investment that goes into it, the approach that needs to be taken, we can kind of get behind it and do it. If there's misalignment, then there's confusion and may even slow down the process further. So it does help with classifying the process and the modernization project.
And I guess that feeds into that sort of wider enterprise strategy for the customer as well. And it's not just about IT, it's not just about the dev teams, it's about the line of business teams as well. And everyone's on that journey together then and driving towards the value that this brings. And if you get people that change or leaders that change, that strategy should hopefully survive that change. It means that you don't end up with pockets of technical debt for changing direction all the time. So that makes sense. So I guess it'd be worth spending a bit of time then as to what drives the conversation between some of them modernized R's, as it were. So if we look at the difference between replatform and re-architect, what do we class as minimally changing versus materially changing, and what are the decision factors that customers should be looking at as to why they'd put an application in re-platform over re-architect?
Yeah, so it's a very fine line, right? But when you replatform an application, you need to think about the longevity of that application. How much additional feature and functionality? Is it doing what you need it to do? If it is, can this application run in cloud with those minimal changes? If it kind of ticks all these boxes and it's okay for the foreseeable future, it is going to give you what you need with the right benefits for your organization, and replatforming might be the right choice. It kind of will get you the first step into those cloud native services, also skilling up on what those services are, how to run them, how to develop on those applications. So it's a good approach to start with replatforming where required. And then if it's a very strategic application, it's kind of not meeting the needs that you have as an organization, and there are some features and functionality that you need to add, it might be the right time to start thinking about re-architecting and investing. And some applications may take priority in this R, so to speak, and you can start to think about, okay, we need to invest a bit more time, but we are going to get more added value at the end because we're going to add more features, functionality. Also, perhaps this approach is going to give you a more microservices architecture approach. Is it going to be kind of future-proofing you to be able to have a more API-led application? Does that mean you can leverage, say, even AI technologies by doing this? So you need to also think when you classify an application for re-architecting. So that's how I would kind of differentiate and kind of put a little bit of a checklist about one versus the other.
No, that makes sense. And Sam, from your perspective, when we start looking at, is it just a migration? Is it modernization? What are you seeing as the blockers from a customer perspective in actually getting into that modernization piece, and why are they getting stuck at the migrate piece and then wondering why they're getting the wrong cloud bills, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. So we see a lot of customers that go for a rehost approach, a lift and shift initially. And we always advise, don't stand still after that. That is the beginning of your cloud journey. Often a lift and shift is necessitated by some sort of business driver. So DC exit, a licensing renewal that wants to be avoided, reduction of overheads in terms of management and CapEx and wanting to move to an OpEx model. It could be a blend, but typically that's what we see more often, is that we need to get to the cloud, and a phase 2 approach will be modernization. What I advise customers is that you run that in parallel, because we want to avoid exactly what I said at the beginning in terms of standing still and getting some pretty nasty shock horror. Oh, cloud isn't any cheaper and we're not running very efficiently because you've just taken a VM and put it somewhere else. And what you don't have all of those concerns around running electricity and managing some physical tin, there is cost. There is a cost penalty for just staying as is. The best to get from cloud is the microservices, the serverless, the decoupled architectures that make use of all of the different features available within that portfolio in Azure, and basically then become a lot more agile in the way you operate in terms of scalability and how quick to react. And that's
promises the cloud gave us and all the value that it should bring is really in that modernized platform as a service, microservices architectures, rather than the sort of static VM platforms that are out there. No, that makes perfect sense. So hopefully that gives us our level set. People know these different categories, so we have an idea why you'd put things in different categories. I think at the end of the day, it's a business decision. What's the value you're getting versus the cost that you're paying for it? Can you get it as a SaaS app for a reasonable price, or do you need to invest in the development teams to get the specific features you need because of the customization or whatever? But at the end of the day, it's that business aligned decision, as you said, Michelle. We've got to make sure everyone's on the same journey. Otherwise, someone's going to get a different view and derail things halfway down the track. So that's great. And we will really then dig into in part 2 about how do we start this? What do we actually gather from a data perspective? What's the process for actually enabling you to make that decision between the different R's? Because if it's about cost and value, you've got to gather the data to do that. So thanks for listening, everyone, and hopefully you can join us in part 2 where we look at that planning and discovery phase. And then again in part 3 when we look at what are the tools on Azure that actually help us actually deliver this at speed and pace. So I've been Rob Sims, Chief Technologist for CDW.
I'm Sam Swaby, Senior Solution Architect from the Microsoft practice.
And Michelle Azzopardi, UK Digital and App Innovation Go-to-Market from Microsoft.
Excellent. Thanks both, and we'll speak to you next time.
Tuning into today's episode. Be sure to check out the back catalogue for more great insights. Don't forget to subscribe via your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. We appreciate your support. And if you have a topic you want us to cover, feel free to reach out. Catch you next time.